Hey, dummy, I'm smarter than you. That could have been an accurate statement if it had come from this little known race of humans that I'm about to introduce you to. But first, let me introduce you to my like, share, and subscribe buttons over there. It's ego check time. Because guess what? We may not be the most intelligent race of humans to have ever existed. According to a theory put forward by two neuroscientists in this 2009 book, and summarized in this Discover article, a race of humans existed in South Africa that had an average IQ of about 150. These people have been named the Boskop people because fragments of a shockingly large skull were discovered there in 1913, and it had an estimated cranial capacity that was 25% greater than ours. And this skull wasn't an aberration or hydrocephalus, because similar skulls were found in the area a few years later. And it also wasn't cranial deformation, because that brutal technique only affects the shape of the skull, not the capacity. More on this later. But while the Boskop's people's brains were bigger than ours, their faces were smaller than ours, giving them a childlike, big-eyed appearance. For example, the modern man's face takes up about a third of the size of their cranium, but the Boskop people's faces only took up about a fifth of their cranium size. And while the combination of a large cranium and an immature face would look odd to modern eyes, it wouldn't look entirely unfamiliar, because similar type faces have been staring at us from book covers, TV shows, movies that depict alien greys. More on this later as well. But when it comes to brains, does size matter? According to the authors of this book, yeah, it does. But this is obviously a controversial theory. And this article does contain a link to a rebuttal by John Hawkes, who's a paleoanthropologist, and you can go check it out for yourself. But the neuroscientists that propose this theory state that expanding the size of the brain changes the internal proportions in a very predictable manner. For instance, when comparing the human brain to the ape brain, most of the fourfold growth occurs in the cortex. And even within the cortex, the areas that grow the most by far are the association areas, not motor skills or coordination. Now, when we compare the Boskop brain to the human brain, the association zones are even more disproportionately expanded, which results in a staggering 53% increase in the prefrontal cortex, which just so happens to be a part of our brain that's closely linked to our highest cognitive functions. This could have enabled the Boskops to be better observers of their environment and make them better at interpreting and predicting outcomes of external events. These abilities would have made them a shoo-in for positions of leadership if our ancients had intermingled with them, as well as potentially leading to the Boskops being revered to the point of worship by our ancestors, which could have led to modern man emulating the physical characteristics of the Boskops. So could they have been the inspiration that led mothers and fathers to disform their babies' heads in an attempt to gain social status? Could the Boskops be the inspiration that led to the design of the headgear that the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom wore? Could it be that the bloodline of the Egyptian pharaohs contained DNA from the Boskop people? Take a look at this image of the pharaoh Akhenaten and his family. Note the unusual size and shape of their heads. And just last month, more elongated skulls were discovered in Iran. They were buried apart from the rest of the population, which is an indication that they might have been the ruling class at that time. And these elongated skulls found in Iran bear a strong resemblance to those that are in Paracas, Peru, which, by the way, had red hair. And just take a look at this guy. Are these the last of a dying breed of intellectually superior humans that lived in a pre-Diluvian world, but that were not able to compete on a level playing field with our more aggressive and savage ancestors after the Younger Dryas catastrophe that occurred 12,000 years ago? And if you don't know anything about that catastrophe, you need to check out some Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock videos. So did the last vestiges of the elongated skull people that survived the catastrophe have to hide from us and use stealth to avoid contact with us? In the event contact was made, would they lie to us and tell us that they were from the heavens so that we wouldn't look for them on Earth? In secluded places like our mountains, our ice-covered lands, and our deep oceans? Have they advanced technologically in secret alongside of us for millennia? And are our sensors just now getting advanced enough to where we can finally start to detect them? Could these people be the brains behind the UFO phenomenon? Have you ever heard of the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis? Think about it this way. If these guys existed today, and you had a classroom of 35 big-headed, baby-faced Boskop kids, 5 or 6 of them would have IQs on level with the highest IQs ever recorded in human history. Now try to imagine what a civilization where 1 out of 6 people was Nikola Tesla could invent. So is this all possible? I'm not a brain scientist or a rocket surgeon, so you're going to have to think for yourself.